Well, hey everybody, I'm Nick Pettit at NickRP on Twitter, and I am a teacher here at Treehouse, which of course is the best way to learn web design, web development, mobile business, and so much more. You can check us out at teamtreehouse.com. I have the website up here on my computer, and you can sign up for a free trial. Now, if you are watching this at teamtreehouse.com/live, you can go ahead and put messages in the chat room and ask questions, and our producer Chris over here will answer them for you if they're just quick questions or if there's something that needs to be brought to my attention. I'll go ahead and answer them. So we'll, if something really important comes up, we'll try to do it right away. But otherwise, we'll just answer questions at the end of this stream. So today, we are going to learn about a new mobile framework. Actually, it's not totally new, but a new version has just been released, and it's called Ratchet. It allows you to build mobile apps, with simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, right away, I should point out that, like it says, this is web-based. So you're building with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is not something that you're going to run on iOS or Android. It's something that you would run in the web browsers of those mobile phone platforms. Another thing I should mention up front about Ratchet is that it is sort of an alternative to responsive web design in a sense. This is a framework that lets you build things specifically for mobile devices. This is not going to work in a desktop browser, and we'll get into how to set up your environment to actually use Ratchet in just a few minutes here. But this is going to be useful if you have a desktop website and you have some sort of an experience that's just so different on mobile, you really need to make a customized mobile website. That doesn't come up too often, but it can. Usually you just want to try to go with a responsive site up front, if at all possible. However, there can be some very specific situations where you want to go with a desktop site, maybe a separate tablet site, as well as a site for mobile phones, with each one offering different experiences. Alternatively, you might actually just want to make a mobile app using Ratchet that users would actually save to their home screens on either iOS or Android and actually use it similar to a native application. One other thing I should point out is that this is not meant to, say for instance, cross-compile to, say, Objective-C or Java and the iOS and Android frameworks. This is just meant to be something that's used in a web browser. So, with all of that out of the way, let's take a look at Ratchet. It is currently in version 2.0.2, and it is created by some of the same people that brought you Bootstrap. So that's why the site might look somewhat similar to what you're familiar with seeing in Bootstrap. If we click on Getting Started, there's a quick start here. And it says, first you want to create your pages. So each view in a Ratchet application is done with a separate page. Then you will connect your pages together with push.js, and this happens automatically. Push is included with Ratchet. We'll see how all of that works. And then you can save the app to your phone. So like I said previously, if you're in Safari, you can save the app to your phone and use it similar to a native application. If you just download Ratchet, you should get all of the components you need, but if you actually want to dig into the source code and look at how Ratchet is actually built, you can do that as well. We'll get back into the page setup here, and I'll show you exactly how to put together Ratchet views with pages. But first, let's go over to the components here and just see what Ratchet actually looks like. I feel like I've been talking about it a lot without actually showing it to you. So here is what Ratchet looks like. So I'm just going to scroll down the components page, and you'll see some of the different things here. So there's things like title bars. Let me go full screen here so I have a little bit more room. There we go. So there's things like title bars, and you can click on each one of these buttons here or these icons. You can do these segmented controls. You can have tab bars down at the bottom here. And if we scroll down further here, there we go, there are also table views like you might find on iOS. You can even add labels and chevrons to them. And up at the top here, you'll notice that there is some base styling, but you can also do iOS styling or Android styling. And if you look carefully at this table view here, you can see that the styling is actually changing so that it looks like those components on those particular platforms. So if we, say, scroll back up to the tab bar here, you can see that if we switch over to the Android styling, it follows the same design patterns that you would expect to find on Android, where that tab bar is up at the top, and iOS, it's down at the bottom. And you get a lot of that for free. It's actually pretty amazing. I'm going to scroll down here some more, just kind of give you a quick tour of more of these components. You can do table views with media, so if you want to add some images there, you can do something like that. I believe we actually do that natively in the blog reader application on Treehouse, so definitely be sure to check that out. Here are some table views with icons, buttons. I really like these toggles. They did a pretty great job of making them look very close to what you would expect to find on iOS native. There's also the base styling here, and of course Android toggles. Pretty amazing. There are, wow, so many other components here. There's block buttons. There are forms, so that's what forms will look like. And you'll notice, again, with the buttons down here at the bottom, you can see how that looks like the styling you'd expect to find on iOS 7, and that's the latest version of Android. So there's also popovers. You can do modals. So a modal looks just like that. It's pretty nice. There's also sliders. So you can swipe through some photos here. It's pretty cool. And here's what it looks like when you load a new page with push. So you can actually tap here and it will load in new pages using a page transition. So to do that, we use the attribute data transition, and we can slide in or slide out. So we'll get to that. And then there's also a set of Ratchet icons, and that can help you style your application so that it's similar to iOS, Android, or just their base styling. And it looks like their base styling uses what looks like iOS icons, but their Android equivalents are right here. So that's a quick tour of all of the components in Ratchet. Now I'd like to show you how to actually set up your development environment for using Ratchet, because even though it's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's a little bit more involved than that. You actually have to have a local web server running. So to start out, let me go out of full screen here, and I am going to be using an example project here. So here is what the directory structure for that looks like. Let me actually pull this up in my text editor here, and it doesn't look like I can increase the font size of my navigator over here, but anyway, there's a CSS folder, an examples folder, fonts, images, and JavaScript. So I have an example application I've put together, and if you would like to download this example application, I have a blog post called The Beginner's Guide to Ratchet, a mobile web framework, and there are download buttons there where you can actually see the demo or download the example code. And to get to the example code, just go to j.mp/ratchet-example. So there that is right there, and I'm assuming Chris Zabriskie here will put that in chat, so you can go ahead and check that out and download it. Let me actually make sure that works really quick. Ah, yes, it does. Now, something to be aware of, if you actually look at this example, you'll notice that if you try to click on anything, nothing actually happens. And that's because you have to actually have touch events enabled in Chrome or whatever other browser you're using, or you can use an actual mobile phone, so you can go to that address on your mobile device. See if I can pull that up again. It's j.mp/ratchet-example. So if you go to that on a mobile device, it should work correctly. And let's see here. There's a couple of other things to go over. So let me open up this example in a web browser so you can see what will happen if you just downloaded this code. So you went to this blog post, downloaded the example code, you unzipped the file, and now you have this folder. If you just double click on this index file here, you're going to see something that looks like this. It's going to look completely broken, like maybe there's a missing style sheet or something like that. And what's actually happening is that you need to be running this using a web server just because of some JavaScript security issues. So, and that's perfectly normal. The way that you can run a really simple web server, especially if you're using Mac OS X, is to use Python. Now, again, in this blog post, I detail exactly how to do that. So if you're on Mac OS X, you can just type in python-m and then type simple HTTP server. And if you're on Windows, I recommend using WAMP to actually create a local server environment. It's really quick and easy to do. If you already have a local server set up, then that's wonderful, and you can go ahead and just use that. Any web server will work as long as you can get to those HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files by connecting to it. So, like I said, I'm on a Mac, so I am going to type in python-m, simple HTTP server. Python comes with every copy of OS X already pre-installed. When I hit enter, it's going to start a local server on port 8000. So that's what it says it's done, serving HTTP hypertext transfer protocol on port 8000. So if I go in my browser to localhost 8000, the colon is for the port number, and hit enter, I'll see my Ratchet application here. Now, once again, we still have that same problem. When we click on things, we can't actually get them to do anything. Now, how do you fix that? Well, you can either enable touch events in your browser, and I have some instructions here for how to do it in Chrome and Firefox. So I'll show you how to do that really quick. You can open the emulation panel in the DevTools. So I am going to open up my settings here. And I think, let's see, show advanced settings should show it, or maybe, actually I don't think that's how you get to the developer tools in Chrome. Anyway, I promise it works. I've done this before, and you can emulate touch events in Chrome. It's not that hard to do. You just have to pull up the DevTools. Maybe it's down here. Is it in? Ah, okay, shoot. It is actually in the DevTools. So you can pull up the DevTools using Command-Option-I on your Mac, or Control-Shift-I, I believe, is the shortcut to bring it up. And then just click on the gear icon over here and go to, I think it should be somewhere in here. I think it's in general. Maybe it's it says open up the emulation panel in the DevTools. I'm not sure where that is. Okay, well, that's all right. I'm sure somebody in chat has figured it out, and I'll add some notes to this video so that you can figure it out. Chris is raising his hand.
Yes, you've got to forgive me, I'm not going to pronounce the name correctly, but they said to right-click, inspect element, developer tool. I think that's where you're already at. You're just looking for the...
Yeah, I was just looking for the emulation panel. No, I'm already in the developer tools. It's somewhere in here, and I always forget how to pull it up.
I think you have to... You turned it on in settings already, right?
Let's see, developer tools. Settings, oh boy. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. That's okay. I'm sure somebody will mention it in chat and we can get back to it. But anyway, you can enable touch events in Chrome or Firefox, and that's one way to work with Ratchet in the browser. However, yes, Chris?
Gil says it's in the rendering tab.
The rendering tab?
Our own Gil Hernandez.
Where's that?
What's going on?
Okay, I'm going to move on.
Go ahead.
I hope somebody posts that in chat. Anyway, that's one way to work with Ratchet. Another thing you can do is actually run an emulator or view it on a touch device. So, for example, if you have your mobile phone connected to the same Wi-Fi network that you're actually running your web server off of, so like if I had this computer connected to my home Wi-Fi network and I also had my mobile phone connected to that same Wi-Fi network, I could actually type in the IP address of my computer and then put the port number 8000 and connect to it that way. And that's a really quick way to check on a mobile device what your website is actually looking like. And it's a great way to work with Ratchet. It's also a great way to just test responsive design on actual devices. But you can also use an emulator, and that's what I'm doing here. If you install Xcode on Mac OS X, you can pull up the iOS simulator. So I have actually, let's see, I'm not running Xcode right now, but if you just open up Xcode, let me close this so I can show you. And you can just close this panel, and up here, I always just type it in. I think it's under like, there we go. Open Developer Tool, iOS Simulator. You can instantly pull it up. And if you want to change the hardware device, that's really easy to do as well. I am going to pull up a smaller iPhone that will hopefully fit onto this computer screen. Oh my gosh, that is gigantic. Let me see if I can cut down that resolution. That's okay. You'll get the idea. So I am going to open up Safari here, and I can just type in localhost 8000, and it will bring up my Ratchet application. So if I actually click on things now, it will pull them up. So that's what typography looks like. That's tab bars down here at the bottom. We can pull up those block buttons. So that's what that looks like. There's also an example of a slider here, and I have a title bar up at the top. And then we can pull up an example of a modal. So I have a modal here, and this could be like settings in your application. And here I have some form elements where you can actually toggle things on and off and see what input boxes look like. And none of these things actually do anything, so this application doesn't actually work. Theoretically, you would hook all of this up with JavaScript or something like that, or maybe a back-end language, and actually make all of this function together in a nice kind of Ajax-y native app feeling way. But the idea is that you want your web app to feel native. Now, you don't have to do that for every web application, but if you're trying to create a mobile native experience, Ratchet is a pretty great way to do that. It's the best one that I have seen so far. Now, I am going to open up the code for this example and take you through some of the things that we have created in this example I just showed you. So, before we get into that, I want to go back to getting started. And I mentioned down here, there's a page setup. And there's 3 simple rules for structuring your Ratchet pages. Any kind of fixed bars that use the bar class need to come first, and they should always be the first thing inside of the body of the page. Everything else should go inside of a wrapper with the class content. So just some sort of div or something like that, and you can put everything inside of content. And then you also need to include some meta tags. So let's take a look at this code here, and let's just start at the top. I mentioned you need to include some meta tags, and let me make this larger so you can see here. The first one is the viewport meta, and this is something I have to look up all the time. I always forget how the viewport meta syntax goes exactly, but basically you can set an initial scale and a maximum scale of 1, and what that's going to do is disable any kind of zooming. So in this application and in the iOS simulator, I can hold down Alt if I want to simulate a 2-finger touch event, but in the Ratchet app, you'll notice that even when I click and try to pinch to zoom, it's not going to do anything. Let me go back home here and show you that it does indeed work. Let's see if, do I have any photos? Well, no. Maybe I can go to Maps. Is that in here? There we go. So I can actually pinch to zoom in my simulator here. So that is working. But if I go back to my application, you'll see that that's disabled here. So you can actually just do that with this viewport meta tag. It's pretty nifty. You also want to say user scalable no and keep the minimal UI. And I believe the minimal UI part will just make any kind of UI sort of disappear to some degree or another if you actually save the app to your device. So let me try doing that so you can see what that looks like. When I click down there at the bottom and say add to home screen, I'll just leave all the defaults. You'll notice that it actually adds a screenshot of the web page, and normally what you would want to do is actually replace that with a touch icon. Not going to get into that here, but you can replace this icon and make that look a little bit nicer. So that minimal UI attribute there, or value for the content attribute and the meta tag, will remove a lot of the user interface elements there. And you can even set the color of the status bar on iOS devices. So that's pretty nice. And then you also want to say, this is web app capable. Yes, and that will basically configure a couple things to make it easier or nicer to save to the home screen. Now, right here, you'll notice that, well, first, I'm including the compiled version of Ratchet. So you need to include ratchet.css. Then you want to include either the iOS or Android theme. So here I'm using the iOS theme. Let me see. Let me make sure that I do have the Android theme here. Looks like I do. Let's see what happens if I just change that right over. I'm not actually exactly sure what's going to happen, but let's see. I'll just try that in my browser. If I refresh, there we go. You can see that everything has switched over. So let me bring that up in the simulator. And I think I actually need to go back home and view this in Safari. So if I refresh this page, there we go. We now have Android styling. You'll see all of the buttons have switched over, and it's that simple to just change the styling into either iOS or Android. And if you want to have both, you can do that with just a little bit more configuration. Again, not going to go into that here. That's not something that's included with Ratchet, but you could detect whether it's an iOS or Android device and serve the appropriate style sheet if that's something that you wanted to do. Next, we include the compiled version of the Ratchet JavaScript, and that's going to give us a lot of things such as push.js. So let me open up, there it is, Ratchet.js, and you'll see that they have quite a lot of code in here. Here's push.js, and that's going to give us all of those nice page transitions and do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, which makes it really easy to put together these applications with these simple pages and classes. Now, down here, we're now inside of the body. Let me make this a little larger so you can see. We're now inside the body, and I've created a header element. And again, you could use a div or any other block level element. Should work just fine here. And I've added the class bar and bar nav. So what does that do? Well, let's switch over to the documentation. Here it is. And we'll go to these components here. And here you can see bar and bar nav will create title bars that are full width and docked to the top of the viewport. So that will allow me to add things like buttons and so on. So if we go back to the code, you'll see that I've used the class icon gear to specify that I want to use an icon, and the icon I want to use is the gear icon for settings. And then I've added the class pull right to move that over to the right side. So right here you can see the pull left and pull right. Utility classes will float the buttons to wherever you want them to go. If I scroll down here to icons, you can see that just like we're doing, they're using the class icon, and then you specify which icon you want to use. So they're using the compose icon, which is the little edit icon you see right there. If you want to use other icons, you can scroll all the way to the bottom and see that full listing of icons again. And here's all the classes to do that. So like I said, I am using icon gear, which is this little icon right there. So let's switch back. Excuse me. Something to notice here is that I have a link here with the href settings modal. And that has a little hash or pound sign in front of it. And that is going to allow me to say that this link should open up a modal window. And that modal is down here at the bottom. I've made a little HTML comment there. And I've said this is the settings modal. So this div right here, oops, I just collapsed it, should be all of our settings. And all of that is right in there. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top here. And you'll notice I also have an H1 here with the title. Now, when you put this inside of the bar or the bar nav, that will actually be what's printed right here. So I've since switched back to iOS styling. You can see that right there. So if I just wanted to say my application, I could do that, save it, switch back, refresh, and there it is. So that is the bar up at the top. And that's just on the index page. What if we want to change this title when we go to another page? Say I go over to this typography page. Well, if I open up the examples folder here and I click on typography.html, you'll see I have a very similar thing going on here. I have that header again in the body of my document, and there is typography right there. And again, I could change that and refresh the page, and there it is. We'll change that back. Now, let's take a look at the content section of a Ratchet page. So we have the header. Let's look at content. Inside of content, there's a couple of different things you can do. there's this class called content padded. And if you want to include some content that should have the standard amount of padding around it, then you can create a div or any other block level element, add the class content padded, and then put your content inside of here. And normal headline elements and paragraphs will work just fine. And you can see what that looks like right here. So here is that headline. Here's the paragraph, and it has some padding around it. Now, let's say that I just removed that. If I go back, refresh the page, you can see that it's now flush against the sides of the browser, which in this case is not what I want. I want that to actually have some padding around it. And the reason that you don't want to just arbitrarily add your own padding unless you really know what you're doing, you really have a specific use case, you want to just use the content padded because it will add the standard amount of padding according to the iOS human interface guidelines and the equivalent on Android. I'm not quite sure what that is, but I'm sure Android has similar design patterns and guidelines that govern how much padding should be on either side of just standard text and elements like this. And you'll notice that that padding matches up perfectly with this table view that I have right below here. So I'm using the class card, and let me delete that so you can see what it looks like without it. So let me just refresh that. If I don't have the class card there, it will present me with a standard table view, which normally is edge to edge. So this is a case where you actually don't want that padding. If you wanted to create a standard table view and just have those table cells stretch edge to edge, then you can do that. But if you add the class card, it will not only add that padding, but also create a nice little border with rounded corners around it to create kind of that card design pattern that you see so commonly in iOS and Android applications. Now, next, I have a couple of things inside of my table view. I'm going to turn on soft wrapping just so that you can see all of this code on one screen and I don't have to scroll back and forth. Actually, I'm going to make my navigator a little smaller there. There we go. That looks good. Now, I have a table view here, and a table view you can create using an unordered list. So the nice thing about Ratchet is it's pretty nice and semantic. It's very similar to how you would normally build a web page. It's not anything crazy with really unusual markup. So that's really great for accessibility and SEO and all that good stuff. Inside of my unordered list with the class table view, I have each list item with the class table view cell. Then inside of that, I have links. So I have these anchor elements here. And I have the class push right. And more importantly, what I want you to notice here is the data transition slide in. So if we go back here, that's pretty standard stuff. There's this unordered list. Each list item is a table cell, just like you'd expect. But it's this data transition that's interesting because this determines how a transition from this page, the current page, and the page that this is linking to will occur. There are other data transitions that you can use, and there's 3 of them actually in Ratchet 2.0. There's slide in, slide out, and I'll just save that so you can see what that looks like. And there's also fade. Now, previously, I have not been able to get fade to actually work, and I've noticed other people posting about it not working, so I'm guessing maybe it's broken. Not really sure. Maybe somebody else has gotten that to work. But so on typography, I've added the transition slide out. So let me click on one of the other links that I have not modified so you can see what it looks like normally. So the page comes in from the right side, slides in. Now if we go back, I click on typography, it's going to slide the other direction. So that's slide out. Let's click on fade, see if that works. Oh my gosh, it actually did work. I don't know what changed, but it works now. So that's what a fade looks like. Hey, that's pretty cool. So those are the three transitions that you can use, slide in, slide out, and fade. And of course, you don't have a fade in or fade out. There's really no need for that. You just are going to fade from one view to another. It's pretty simple. So that's how the transitions work, and that's being done, again, with push.js. And you just have to say data transition, slide in, and it is going to load in whatever page that you're linking to. And in this case, I'm linking to that examples folder, and inside of that, I have each of the 5 examples I'm linking to in this table view. Now, one more thing on this page that I want to go over is the modal. So up at the top here, I, again, have that link to the settings modal, and that's appearing right here. So if I click on that, it's going to open up this little modal window. But that's not everything that goes into this. So that's just the gear icon. That's just this button. When I click on that, it actually brings up this settings example. And for modals, you don't actually create a separate page. You actually just want to include the modal on the same page in which it should appear. So down here I have my settings modal, and I've added the class modal. And more importantly, I've added the ID settings modal, and I have uppercase modal there so that I know it's exactly the same as this right here. So the href hash settings modal will bring me to this particular modal. And that's important because theoretically you could have multiple modals on the same view. So for example, I might have a couple of different buttons here that bring up different modals, and to know which one I'm referring to with which button, I need that ID to match that href. And if you're familiar with other CSS frameworks like Foundation or Bootstrap, that's pretty standard stuff. That's usually how modals work. So not anything unusual there, which is good. You don't want to surprise people too much with that kind of thing. So again, inside my modal, it looks very similar to the page that's above here. It has a header with a bar, and you could make that a button bar, whatever you wanted. And then we have content again. So inside of content, I have an input group. So on my form class, I'm adding, on my form element, I'm adding the class input group. And then I have a couple of different types of input in there. And if you'll notice here, one of these types is email. Now, what does that mean? Well, if I go over here and I click on, say, full name here, I want to type in my full name. I can type in whatever here and go ahead and delete that maybe. And there's what the keyboard looks like. Pretty normal. Now, if I click on email, you'll notice that down here at the bottom, it's brought up a slightly different keyboard. And that keyboard is optimized for typing in email addresses, and any characters that are not valid in an email address will not appear. And they also have the @ sign there because that's, of course, a symbol that's used in every email address. So you'll have to have an @ sign there, and you'll have to have a period. So it's nice that that's right there. And that's just a nice way to present the correct or most optimized keyboard for the task at hand. I think there's also one for phone. I don't know the type off the top of my head. I think it's just phone. Let's try it and see if that works. No, not quite. It's probably like tel or telephone or something like that. Let me just try one more, see if it works. Yes, it is tel, so short for telephone. And then if I click, you'll see, hey, look, it knows that a telephone number should go in there, and it brings me up just a number pad because there shouldn't be any letters or symbols in a telephone number. So let me change that back to email. And the input group class here, brought that up previously. It basically just groups all of these together. into kind of a nice convenient group of inputs. Further down here, I've actually created a table view to hold some additional settings. And inside of the table view, I have a couple of toggles, and you can see those right here. So I have a little wrapper for the toggle, and then the actual toggle handle. And that's just this little widget right here. So that's how you put those together. And then at the very bottom here, I have a block button. So to do that, I am padding the content. If I didn't do that, it would just go edge to edge. And then I have a button block here. So I'm saying it's a button and it's a button block, and then I can type in what I want that button to say. So I have it saying save settings. So that's just a quick tour of how Ratchet works. You can look at the other pages in the example, check out the blog post. There might be a little bit more information. We didn't get into the slider here, but that's pretty cool. You can look at the code and see how all of that works. Just about at the end here, but I've left some time for Q&A. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat, and I will be happy to answer them. We can talk about Ratchet.
First things first.
The
developer tools.
Okay.
It sounds like people with different versions are finding it in different places.
That does not surprise me.
Yeah.
Chrome changes things pretty frequently. I thought they were in here.
At the moment,
Okay.
if in the dev tools, up in the top right of the dev tools, there's a little lines with a little arrow going into them next to the settings bar. Do you have that?
Next to the settings bar. It says show drawer. Oh, okay. All right, we're getting close.
And there it is.
Emulation.
There it is.
Look at that. Psh,
That's where
done.
I think it is in the most recent version, but some folks were finding it in different places.
I could have sworn it was in settings, and I think it was at some point. So I apologize for that. They move things around in DevTools pretty frequently. So sensors. So you go, for everyone watching at home, right now, at the time of this recording, you go to Show Console, and here you have the normal console like you'd expect, but then you click the Emulation tab, go to Sensors, and select Emulate Touchscreen, and let's see if that magic just worked. I might have to refresh the page. Let's see. No, it doesn't. So after all that, maybe it doesn't actually work. I'm not sure. Maybe I can simulate like an iPhone or something, maybe. Emulate. Oh, wait. Okay.
Hey, look at that.
Maybe that did it. Oh, I have no idea. I think I do actually have to hit emulate there. Yeah. So if you don't have an iOS simulator, if you're not running macOS 10, you can go ahead and do this. It looks a little buggy. I've seen this in videos. I've never actually used this before because I usually just use the iOS simulator, but it's not too bad. Looks like it renders okay. So if you want to see what this looks like on different devices, I guess you can just use this little emulation tool here. Let's see, a Google Nexus 7 tablet. Look at that. Wow, that looks terrible. But you get the idea. So pretty cool. Awesome. Well, I'm glad someone was able to figure that out for me. Thank you so much.
Okay, Svetlana asks, can you use Ratchet with back-end languages like Objective-C and Java?
So Objective-C and Java are the programming languages that are used for iOS and Android, respectively. You probably could, if you wanted to do like a web view. So those two languages are not back-end web languages like Rails or, Ruby, PHP, and so many others. You could, however, probably create an application with a web view in an Android or iOS application and then have a Ratchet app inside of that web view. I am not a mobile developer, so that might be terrible advice. I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Probably not, but I suppose you theoretically could do it. I don't think, though, that Ratchet or the native Objective-C or Java code could actually talk to one another in any meaningful way. And if they could, it would probably be pretty difficult. So I don't think you want to do that, but if for whatever crazy reason you really wanted to, sure. I mean,
That was one of the other questions, was can you wrap that up into WebView and put it into iTunes or the Play Store?
I mean,
Sounds like you can, but maybe it's not
sure.
the best idea.
I mean, I assume so. I don't see why not. It's just a web page. So if you have it hosted somewhere, yeah, I mean, it's just a web page, and if you bring it up in a web view, it should work. I haven't tried it, but I don't see any reason why it wouldn't.
Erica asks, is there a way to make popovers show up over any text instead of just title bars?
Is there a way to make popovers show up over any text? Yeah, so we're talking about the modals here. Let me try creating another modal really quick. So let's do this, and we'll pick another icon here. Let's see. Let's go to goratchet.com, which is probably something I should have mentioned at the beginning. You can go to goratchet.com to check out Ratchet. Let's go to the components here and check out the icons down at the bottom. And that one looks good. I'm just going to say icon star. Okay, so we'll create a new star icon here. There we go. And I'm going to call this my modal. So let's save that and refresh and see what that actually did. Okay, so cool. It added a new icon right here. And by the way, there's probably a slightly better way to do this than just pulling everything to the right. You might want to actually start to use a better design pattern there, like a button bar or something. But anyway, I mean, there it is. And right now it doesn't do anything because we don't actually have my modal. But we can go down here and create that. So let me just copy the settings modal really quick here. I think that is where it ends. Let me create some room to work here so you can see what I'm doing. And let's just paste that in. I'm going to delete everything inside of here for the most part, except for the header and then maybe just a couple forms here. So let's leave all of that there. And it does look like we're missing a div here, so let me add that back in. Cool. Actually, that's going to break because I think I did that wrong. Oh boy, we're getting into divitis. Let's see if I did that right. A little scared that I didn't. Actually, that's a good question. Does the modal go inside of content? I don't think it does. No. So the modal is separate. So we have a separate modal here, and that's where it closes out. Okay. And then here's another settings modal, which we'll change in a minute. And there's content. Okay, we're good. So we want to change this to my modal. Let me double check, make sure that is what I called it. Yep, my modal. Just copy and paste that, make sure there's no typos. And then I'll change the title here. Say my modal. And I don't actually need this here. Don't need another icon here. In fact, I don't know why I put that in the settings modal, but hey, there it is. Oh, that's to close it. I didn't even go over that. Okay, so hey, there you go. If you want to close the modal, you can use icon close and then just use the same href value inside of the modal. So there we go. And now let's just add a button really quick. So we'll throw that into content here. And we'll say my button. There we go. And if we switch back, refresh the page, click on the star, bam, there is a second modal window. So yes, you can have multiple modals in Ratchet, just like that. So yes, that's how you do it.
The answer is yes. Perfect. Probably last question. What about, Ben wants to know if you can use Ratchet with a mobile development framework like PhoneGap. I'm not sure if you're familiar with PhoneGap.
I've never used PhoneGap. So you know what? I'm actually just going to say I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know if that would actually work or not. I probably, but yeah, I'm not sure.
That's fine. That's all the questions we have.
That's it? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Wow. I mean, I've only just started using Ratchet. There's certainly a lot more that you could probably do with this. I don't actually know of any examples out there that are really making great use of Ratchet just yet. Oh, well, hey, look. No, never mind. There's an examples page on the Ratchet site, but I remember now that those are actually just examples of Ratchet applications that they've built. They're just kind of demos. So, but if you know of a Ratchet application out there, I'd love to hear about it. I haven't seen it in the wild yet, but maybe I have seen it and just haven't realized. But I think this is a really cool way to build apps. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to watch more videos like this one, you can check us out at teamtreehouse.com, which is probably where you're already watching this, teamtreehouse.com/live. We do these live workshops every week, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesdays. So be sure to check us out next week. And I am at NickRP on Twitter. And thanks so much for watching. We will see you real soon.